Last year, Michigan football had adopted a slogan for themselves by the end of the year, which was "Run the damn ball." And indeed, they did. Against Ohio State, Michigan had nearly 300 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. And against Iowa, the following week in the Big Ten championship game, Michigan rushed for around 200 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. That in total is around 500 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns against 2 top 15 opponents in back-to-back weeks. One being a team that if they had beat us, they would have gone on to the college football playoff. They were a hated rival in Ohio State that Michigan had not beaten since 2011. And against Iowa, it was Michigan's first time playing in the Big Ten championship game against a defense that was much more sound, disciplined, and just better overall than Ohio State's defense was, and Michigan still crushed them via the ground, rushing for 6.2 yards per carry in that game, and a similar yards per carry against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Michigan football started out 2021 being able to run the ball very well, but then against Rutgers, Wisconsin, Michigan State, other teams as well, they got into this limbo lull area where it was, 3 yards a carry or so. They struggled to run at times, create bigger plays, and while they could run and still maintain an identity, it looked sluggish at times and sometimes held Michigan back. By the end of the year, of course, as I just mentioned, all of this came together and Michigan's rushing offense just burst against Ohio State and Iowa. It looked much better at the end of the year than it did at the middle of the season, which was certainly encouraging. This, of course, followed up with a very disappointing game against Georgia, but to Michigan's credit, that was one of the best, if not the best, defense that Michigan has faced in its football history, very possibly, just given the amount of first-round talent there and the fact that it was coached by defensive coordinator Dan Lanning, co-DC Glenn Schumann, and the fact that the head coach of that Georgia team is Kirby Smart, who was a defensive coordinator at Alabama for nearly a decade under Nick Saban and commanded several great defenses there. I'd actually argue that Alabama's defenses have not been the same since he left. So yeah, but Michigan football and their players don't want to just be fine with, losing to Georgia. They want to get back and they want to win a national title. And whether you think you're going to get an answer out of me in this video, this is the wrong video to get an answer out of me for that. Though I can give you one right now and just say that it's more likely not than it is likely that Michigan will win a national title. But what we are talking about today is something that I think Michigan can and will be number one in. And that is their running back room. That is their run game specifically tailored to their running back room. Not talking about who I think is going to be the starter in J.J. McCarthy, running read options or scrambling, or even utilizing A.J. Henning or Roman Wilson or Cornelius Johnson less often than Henning on end-arounds or wide receiver runs. We're just talking about the running back room primarily for today and why I think it's going to be the best running back room in the nation, which will help spur Michigan to have the best rush offense in the country. They, of course, will be helped by an offensive line up front that returns 2 starters from last year's unit and brings in transfer center Victor Oluwatimi, who is from Virginia, was an All-American there. Of course, nothing is a guarantee. Chemistry could possibly not be the same as it was in 2020 due to all the new faces. The offensive line could fall off. I think it will be pretty similar, maybe slightly better than last year. Of course, it will look different. There will be some better and worse aspects. It's hard to get a better O-line without recruiting better at that position. Michigan very much they developed fantastically for last year's O-line coach Sharon Moore did. So that will, of course, help the run game. But Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum are 2 fantastic running backs. Blake Corum is certainly a guy who I think is a top 10. I actually have him top 5 running back in the nation. And Donovan Edwards could be a starter at a plethora a plethora of Power 5 schools. So pairing them together, I think, makes the best running back room in the nation. I don't have Blake Corum as the number one running back. In fact, I have Deuce Vaughn as number one, Travion Henderson as number two, and Sean Tucker as number three, with Blake Corum landing right at the number 4 spot in front of guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Muhammad Ibrahim, Braylon Allen, Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky, and Tank Bigsby from Auburn. Just mentioning the schools of those last two because for some Big Ten fans who don't always look into Kentucky or Auburn, you might not have known those guys as well as, let's just say, the others. They're being talked about a lot less than guys like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, for example. Same thing with Sean Tucker at Syracuse. He's a very good running back. And Lou Nichols, a running back out of the MAC, just seeing how well he's done, could be up on this list as well. But I think Blake Corum is a really good running back. I think he's an elite running back. And Hassan Haskins graced Michigan with just having a very reliable power back. He rushed for 1,327 yards this past season for nearly 5 yards a carry and 20 rushing touchdowns. He will be missed, but him leaving opens up for more explosive and shifty running back play. Seeing, as a Michigan fan, Kenneth Walker dice us up, I watch that happen, and I want nothing more than for Michigan's ground game to look exactly like how Kenneth Walker looked like, but with a much better offensive line, because that would be hard for any team, even last year's Georgia's defense, to completely contain. And I think that Michigan's run game and their running back production from last year is just going to be absolutely fantastic. So first and foremost, let's start it off by talking about Michigan's 2021 rush attack. From there, we'll get into Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and how they specifically did in 2021. Then we're going to talk about my projections for the combined stat totals of Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum as they relate to the ground game. I'll mention their air games as well, because both are better receivers than Hassan Haskins was. Heck, Donovan Edwards even had a fantastic game too, but we'll get into that later. Michigan's 2021 rush attack had 3,001 yards, which was 8th in the nation. They rushed for 214.4 yards per game, which was 15th. They had 5.2 yards per carry, which was also 15th. Little typo there, just ignore it. And they had 39 rushing touchdowns, which was 3rd in the nation. And they ran on 58% of their plays, which was 23rd in the nation. Of course, the service academies were ahead of Michigan in most, if not all, of these categories, minus the rushing touchdown aspect. 39 rushing touchdowns is a lot, especially for a team that, doesn't run the ball as much as the service academies do, or a team that isn't even top 10 in rush yards per game. Teams like Baylor, the service academies, for example, and I think BYU possibly made up that top 10. It was a lot of interesting teams and a lot of good teams too. Being able to run the football very effectively is the sign of a good team. It's normally the sign of strong offensive line play, unless you have this amazing X-factor player, like let's say Kenneth Walker. And even then, Michigan State's offensive line was not like, they weren't in the bottom 25 or bottom 30, for example. So running the football is it's absolutely important. And Michigan was also an effective, efficient offense to go along with it. They were well schemed, well prepared. They were much more effective at passing the football along with running the football than I have seen in previous years. This was one of the most well-planned, probably the most well-planned and best schemed offense of the Jim Harbaugh era. It was 8th in offensive efficiency. So top 10, it was actually more efficient, according to ESPN, than our defense was, than Michigan's defense was this past season. So it was an amazing rush attack. It was a rush attack that, again, I as a Michigan fan, and I mention this because I think it's important to mention it. It was one of the better running attacks in the nation. There was a lot more talent to be desired from. I think, but with a guy like Hassan Haskins, where you can just get guaranteed an extra 1 or 2 yards from just him being a workhorse, always falling forward, you have to do what you got to do. It's why Donovan Edwards, who's a 5-star, is here, along with Blake Corum. Those guys had more talent than Haskins, which is why I said last year I felt like there was more to be desired from the run game at times with talent, but they didn't have the most experience either. And when Corum went down and got banged up, you had to go with Haskins. The most reliable running back by a mile last year, whether it's by health, whether it's just the fact that he never fumbled. He didn't fumble at all. Not even in his entire career did Hassan Haskins fumble. So the rushing attack was powerful. Number 1, it had its explosive moments. Number 2, and number 3, but the more I think about it, probably number 2 would just be its efficiency. Very few fumbles, especially from Hassan Haskins, who again had 0. Very few mistakes and such. And when there were mistakes, you noticed, just like any team, when they make mistakes, you notice it. But this run game helped Michigan win 12 games and helped them win a Big Ten championship and overthrow Ohio State for the first time since 2011. More specifically, overthrow a top 3, I think, Ohio State team for the first time since 2003. Maybe top 2. I'd have to check Ohio State's ranking in 2003. But that was the last time Michigan, before this year, beat a ranked Ohio State team. And I think beating a ranked rival is better than beating a rival who had their worst season since World War II, which was Ohio State's 2011 season. And this 2021 rushing attack returns quite a lot of production. It loses its most productive piece in Hassan Haskins, who again will be dearly missed, but it also returns the most talented pieces in Corum and Edwards. Corum being a 4-star out of Virginia, Edwards being a 5-star out of Michigan itself. Edwards being a guy who has the most raw talent, as Donovan Edwards currently stands at 6 foot 202 pounds. He is an amazing receiver. And the game against Maryland shows that. Yes, Maryland had one of the worst defenses in the Big Ten last year, but when you're a running back, you have a long of 77. He had a 77-yard reception that I think went for a touchdown. And on top of that, in total, he had 170 receiving yards that game as well. That's impressive. That is impressive. And that was that was not all out of the backfield either. His 77-yard reception was when Cade McNamara threw that to him. He was running down the field. It wasn't out of the backfield. He spins around, jukes several defenders, jitterbugs himself all the way to the end zone. He ran that route like a receiver. And that's what impressed me. So he's a great receiver. Having him with that, you normally use the term dual threat capability for quarterbacks, but I think it's appropriate here. He can run the football. He's shown explosiveness there as a true freshman, and then shows similar explosiveness in the air. Having another full off season with Michigan, with Mike Hart, the running backs coach, is going to really help him. In 2021, Edwards had 174 rushing yards for 5 yards a carry and 3 rushing touchdowns. He also had 1 receiving touchdown and 265 receiving yards for 13.3 yards per reception. And then there's Blake Corum, the main guy. He does not have the same raw talent that Donovan Edwards does. He's 5'8", 200 pounds, but he's shifty, quick, and like the 5'8" height that I just mentioned, with those 200 pounds of almost exclusively muscle, he has that low center of gravity that gives him some of those power moments. The one that I remember specifically is when he was playing against Wisconsin, and he got hit hard, and he still fell forward for an additional yard. So that power element from Haskins, you're not going to see that same exact thing, but Edwards' raw talent and Corum's low center of gravity with those two things, I can promise you that Michigan will still carry that power run game element for sure. Corum had 952 yards for 6.6 yards per carry and 11 rushing touchdowns. He also had 141 receiving yards for 5.9 yards per reception and 1 receiving touchdown. Corum also had only 1 fumble the entire year, and that was against Georgia, when I think it was Nakobe Dean perfectly hit the ball right out. That is another really good player who, surprisingly enough, didn't get drafted very high in the NFL. I was just going off on a little tangent there. But Corum, also very reliable with the football, does not fumble a whole lot. Neither did Edwards. He had 1 fumble against Northwestern, which was a pretty off game for Michigan. I thought that they were looking ahead toward MSU for the majority of that matchup. But Michigan returns a hefty amount of experience here. You have raw talent in Edwards, who got a ton of playing time last year. And you have Blake Corum, who, again, if not for that injury against Michigan State, where he had to sit out against Indiana, not against Indiana, he played for 1 snap there, or at least had 1 carry there, had to sit out versus Penn State, didn't see action versus Maryland. If not for that injury, he would have crossed for over 1,000 yards easily. And on a bum ankle, he ran for nearly 100 yards against Ohio State. And in the Iowa game, he only had 5 carries and had 74 rushing yards and a touchdown. That touchdown being on a long of 67, which was an amazing run. So with the amount of experience here, the talent, and the fact that these guys are going to have a full off season of work, just imagine how good this running back room is going to be and how well it's going to produce behind what could be the nation's number 1 O-line as well. So Michigan's O-line and running back room are certainly its strengths, and I expect Michigan to, while I think they're going to pass a little more with a good QB room and a good wide receiver room, their run game and O-line are still by far their strengths, along with their tight end room, all of which screams power football. So I think these two combined, and I'm using projections and trying to do this stuff similar to what I did in my CJ Stroud video. So these are just estimations. They're early, somewhat premature, subject to change. So take them how you're going to take them. You can have an opinion on them. Just, I don't even know what I'm saying. But yeah, you can have an opinion on them. I think that combined, these guys are going to have 411 rushing attempts for 2,601 rushing yards, 6.3 average yards a carry, 30 rushing touchdowns. And these stats are just stats, of course, and they're just projections, but I do think they tell a story here too. This is a few hundred more yards than Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum combined for in the 2021 season. And I'm also expecting others like Tevier Dunlap, for example, to get some carries in garbage time or blowout games, or even occasionally, because Mike Hart liked to do this with Edwards, occasionally at some point in the game, you get a third stringer a chance to prove himself. I think because of the more explosive feel here, that Michigan is they're going to have more explosive plays, longer runs, and such, and that's where you get the few extra 100 rushing yards. But Haskins and Corum, last year, Corum had 11 rushing touchdowns, Haskins had 20. It's 31 rushing touchdowns. I think the lack of that power element, plus the fact that I think J.J. McCarthy is going to either start for the majority or all of the season, or at least get more playing time, that combined with less of that power element you had in Haskins means when it's, let's just say, 1st and goal at the 2, you're probably going to see more of a, you're going to see more J.J. McCarthy read options than you are always going to see Hassan Haskins, because he's no longer at Michigan, of course, running it up the middle until Michigan gets there. So I think that because you have a more mobile QB situation with J.J. McCarthy, as long as he starts or gets more playing time, and more of that explosive rather than power element. Michigan's going to have around the same amount of rushing touchdowns. They're going to have more explosive touchdown runs, that's for sure, I think at least, combined with more passing touchdowns and more rushing yards. But you're not going to see the same when you are in that 3rd and 2 area. It's not going to be that same guarantee. So 3rd and goal from the 2, for example, you're not going to have the always power back, run it up the middle, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. But I think this is going to be the #1 rush attack in the nation. I am pretty confident in that. I'm as confident in that as I am in CJ Stroud being the best QB in the nation, as these two videos are pretty similarly formatted, similar style, and I actually like that. I'm going to try and do more of these videos more often. Michigan also, to help them further, is facing what I think will be an easier schedule than the 2021 season was. They open up against Colorado State. They face Hawaii and UConn as well. Those 3 opponents, you just know Michigan is just going to stat pad themselves against on the ground, whether it's with Corum, Edwards, Dunlap, whether A.J. Henning and Roman Wilson or Cornelius Johnson just go crazy with their end-arounds. You know Michigan's run game and their stats overall are going to be padded in those games as well. But again, these stats, this projection, the 1-2 punch projection is just for the main 2 running backs. So for Corum and Edwards, I think that J.J. McCarthy, A.J. Henning, Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson occasionally as well, along with Tavier Dunlap, you're going to see a few more rushing yards. I think you're going to see well over that 3,000 mark. I think it's going to be more rushing yards than last year, along with more passing yards from last year's offense. With Michigan's offense, I think, taking a step forward, the defense taking a step backward. If Michigan wants to reach the college football playoff again this year, if they want to have a chance at a national title or a chance to repeat last year's success, the offense has to take a step forward. The offense has to be better than it is last year, and I think Michigan's offense will be better than it is last year. You're going to see more of a passing element. I think Michigan's going to pass more often, but with more explosive running backs, an offensive line that I think will be more similar than different. You're going to see overall more total yards and production on the ground, as Michigan's talent in the backfield is going to be further utilized and developed. And that's all I have to say for this video about Michigan football. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video down in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Again, if you like Big Ten football, not just college football, make sure to subscribe, comment your thoughts down below. I'm going to be doing a BYU video tomorrow and a Nebraska video in the coming days, along with the most underrated Power 5 teams in the next coming days as well. So a few videos planned. Hit the notification bell if you want to see when those videos are posted so you can watch them. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.